so today, what we're going to do is we're going to move on to starting to integrate the whole aspect of mindfulness, because we've talked about mindfulness of the breath, the body, emotions, and now we're going to get thinking today. But before we do that, because last week we talked about emotions, which is the most powerful part of mindfulness. In my own experience is that most people, when they're mindful of the breath, they go, okay, I'm not sure why I'm doing this, but I'll go for it. And then when they do body sensations, they go, okay, that. But when they get to emotions, and mindfulness asks them to be present for their emotions, all of a sudden, I don't know about that. That is where transformation starts to take place. And the same thing will happen with thinking. From a mindfulness standpoint, when we're mindful, there's no hierarchy here. There's nothing like, oh, the emotions are more important than the body, or the breath is more important than this. They're all basically saying they're just being mindful of all of these things. So, what came up for you this week? Or what didn't come up? Or questions that you have about just being mindful of, say, your emotions? Yes.
I found it and this might not be a problem, but I found it really difficult to be mindful of emotions as anything except for a body sensation. You know what I mean? So you talked about you'll look and see that most emotions manifest themselves in the body. But I'd try to be mindful of the emotion, and it would just end up being oh, my chest feels tight or whatever it is, and I wouldn't be able to find anything else to be mindful of. You know what I mean?
It's okay. So I'm glad you brought this up, because what happens is an emotion comes up. I see my body sensations. I look and see that I don't have anything else. Done. Great. There's nothing that's supposed to happen here, right? I mean, this is part of the beauty of this whole thing is that if it doesn't arise, it doesn't arise, right? But the good news is that you saw it in your body. Right? Which is, I gave you these concentric circles last time, and I said, it's better to bring the emotion into your body than to bring the emotion into your thinking. Because that's where the thinking is just going to spin off more emotions. Right? So that was the right direction. Yes?
I found it easier that sort of stress or anxiety that was kind of more on a micro level, I was able to sort of manage that a lot better, but I think it was kind of bigger picture things, I think more macro level things that I feel like I had difficulty letting go of those sorts of things. So for example, if there was, too many things to do in one day, and I was worried I didn't have enough time to do those things, I think I was able to sort of center myself around that. But if it was more of what am I doing with my life sort of a thing,
those are bigger.
That's kind of a bigger animal to try and tackle.
That's okay. You're not going to get this in 3 weeks,
right.
just so you know. But one of the things, but this is important that you're bringing up, because, one of the things that's happening here is some people think of all of this as just stress reduction. They think of it very narrowly, oh, I'm just doing this to lower my stress. Actually, what you're doing is something bigger than that. You're actually, in a sense, by kind of calming the mind down and just kind of being more relaxed, etc. Is you're allowing yourself to be more in touch with who you really are. And it's in that doing that you'll find more of your authentic self. And it's the authentic self that you're all trying to connect with to say, what am I doing with my life? Right? Because that's what ends up happening is you're saying, okay, what am I doing with my life? I'm not even sure what my life is, right? And so there is an end goal to this, just so you know, that is not just about let's just reduce our anxiety and then we'll kind of go out the door. The practice actually takes you to a completely different place. But not in 3 weeks. Okay? but maybe a bit wrong. Anybody else? We're just talking about like the difficulty or not of the emotion.
I was doing there was like the body scan one, have like things and everything, so I was just doing that, and then an emotion popped up, and I just didn't know how to like make that transition, so I feel like I didn't know how to just sit there
Right.
with the emotion. I just like my initial reaction was to open my eyes, and
Right.
it was kind of, so I don't know how to just sit there.
I sit there with it. Yeah, and so I can give you the instructions once again as to what you do with your emotion. And just so you know, some emotions, so we have a variety of emotions. Some of them are simple emotions, like frustration that we have, or impatience, et cetera, et cetera. And some of those are really easy emotions. Some people have really profound, difficult emotions that arise when they do mindfulness meditation. And so I'm going to be giving you a couple of different ways of handling this. So this is like, think of this as the first way, which is what I talked about last week. And then in a couple of weeks, or next week, I'll give you a second way of doing it. But really the first thing that you do is when you have an emotion, it's like what you heard before, when you have an emotion, the first thing you want to do is just start by just accepting that this emotion exists. This is one of the hardest things for people to have, because their tendency, all of our tendencies, this is not you or anybody, this is the human tendency, is to see the emotion and not want it to be there, especially if they're difficult emotions. Right? You see anger arise, and you say, I'm not an angry person, I shouldn't be angry, and you want that anger to go away. That's a very normal sort of a thing. But from a mindfulness standpoint, the first thing you want to do is just accept the fact that this is anger. So when I say you're accepting, you're not approving of it. I'm not saying approve of the fact that you have anger. And it doesn't mean that you might ultimately want not to be an angry person. But right now, in this moment, you have anger. So accept it. And then what you do is you bring it into your body. You say, where in my body do I experience this anger? And then you shift your attention. So this is an intentional thing. Where's my attention? My attention has gone from on the emotion of anger, now to my attention is where is the anger expressed in my body? And I just sit with it. My attention just rests there. It's not judging it. Again, everything I say, whenever I say this, your attention is moving there, so you're present for it, right? But you're relaxed. This is tension in my body. And then just be sure to not identify it, because this is the thing that people get into trouble. They'll put it in their body and they'll say, okay, so this is my tension. But that's not what you want to do. You want to say, this is just what tension is like. Take the I out of it. Take the me out of it. Take the my out of it.
What about grief?
What?
What about grief?
Same thing. Grief is exactly the same thing. Grief is, again, it's an emotion.
That people really want to stay away from.
They want to stay away from it. And so think about what the alternative is. I have grief. I don't want to see grief, so I push it away. So what's going to happen with that grief? Is that grief going to magically just disappear? They hope it disappears. It doesn't. What happens is it just waits until you're in the shower or something when your mind is relaxed, and then the grief kind of comes out. So you'll be like in a tussle with all of these emotions either for the rest of your life, which is what happens with some people. You'll either be in a tussle with them, or what you'll do is you'll pack them down with resentment or something else to kind of say, okay, I'll get that. That thing will just stay there, and I'll put a nice dosage of kind of a cork of resentment on there, and you'll just through life resenting everything. And mindfulness says, okay, here's a different way. Just be with the grief. Make it simple. be with the grief, be present, be non-judgmental. It's because what will happen is when you're with the grief, and this goes for any emotion, is that the grief will arise. You might actually have tears in your eyes. But just an FYI, if you really are grieving, you should have tears in your eyes. They're not bad. You're not going to fall apart because you have tears in your eyes. But that doesn't mean you're going to be living a life of grief. You won't. You won't be living a life of grief. What you'll do is the grief will arise, and then it will do what all emotions want to do, which is to move on. Emotion is something immovable. It wants to move on. As human beings, what we're doing is we're taking these emotions, we're personalizing them, and basically by repressing them, we're basically saying we're going to make them stay. You can let them move. So everything I'm saying right now, you can all try. You can actually try for yourself. The next time any of you experience an emotion, I don't care what it is. You're sitting on your cell phone, your girlfriend or boyfriend or spouse or whatever sends you a text that really upsets you, okay? Right? Can you imagine that happening? Right? My wife the other day, what she did was she texted me and she said, our car was stolen. Turns out it wasn't stolen. She misplaced it. Our car was stolen. Woo. Can you imagine? I'm just sitting there in my house. So what do? I just close my eyes and I go. Took about 60 seconds, and the initial reaction that I had completely went away. Got in the car, drove, and settled the whole thing. An alternative was, oh my God, this is happening. What are we going to do? How am I going to get to work tomorrow? There's a whole different way I could have handled this. Right? So check it out for yourself. The only thing I'm cautioning you on all of this is don't take the emotion and start thinking about it. That is what's going to get into, that's going in the opposite direction. Because as I said last time, when you start thinking about the emotion and trying to understand why you have emotion, and go through this whole analytic process that most people do about their emotions, all that happens is you're going into thinking, which is now not in the present moment. And usually the thinking, it's kind of like hyperlinking in your mind. It just kind of, hyperlinks from this page to this page, and then there's this page, and the next thing you know, you're on some other page, and that page is completely unrelated, but it has its own emotion, so now you've got that emotion. All right? And you've got that emotion, and you start thinking about that, because you say, geez, now I have two emotions. Why do I have two emotions? So you start going into thinking, and you start hyperlinking again, and the next thing you know, you've got a whole mess of stuff. So don't do that. Or let's put it this way. If you do that, just do it and then see if that's helpful for you. And here's another way. Try this and see if this is more helpful. Okay?
I did that.
Which one?
The one where, because somebody said something to me, and my first reaction was to pick up the phone and call somebody else to, do you know what this so-and-so said? And then I stopped and I was like, wait, what am I doing?
Right.
And why am I doing that? I mean, I was angry, but
So then
it's
just
like,
be with the
what was
anger.
that next step? It would just prolong the ridiculousness of the situation.
So that's what kind of cascades you out into this. That's how people kind of like prolong the emotion. It's okay, so that you get angry. Everybody gets angry. I think this is one of the things that you learn from this whole practice, is that these emotions that you have are not unique to you. They're part of the human experience. And so you can just start by being present for it. So you can see more a little bit about these emotions, because we're going to talk about thinking, and thinking has some relation. Yes.
I was going to say, so I know part of what you're trying to do, I guess, is look at the way that emotions arise, because and sort of notice that they arise
Yeah.
from nowhere almost, and then pass away in a similar fashion. But I find that when that happens, that it's not so much I'm thinking about like what makes me mad or whatever, and I fall down. But that's what I'm thinking about. I'm like I'll suddenly experience an emotion, and I'll be like I'll be like thinking about it mindfully, think about it in the context of mindfulness, not mindfully, but you know what I mean,
Right.
like thinking about that process and being like, okay, I start like intellectualizing the process of mindfulness, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
But now you're thinking about it.
Yeah, no, I know.
And thinking is not in the present moment. This is what I said. Most of the time when people go into thinking, until we do this, they start getting into the contents of the thinking, and the contents of the thinking are not in the present moment. They're usually fantasies, stories, etc. that you have about what's going on. And mindfulness asks you, that's kind of interesting, but let's talk about what's really going on. Right now, you're angry. What's it feel like in the body? What's going on right now? And so you can always answer this question every single time by just saying, what's happening right now? Right now. So why don't we do a little meditation, and then what we'll do is, then I'm gonna turn our attention to thinking, and you'll see how these things join up together. Okay? So this will be a simple meditation, and so just relax and see if you can just take a position that's somewhat alert in the chair that you're sitting on. Bringing your shoulders back and down so that you're sitting up as straight as you can. Because we want to take an alert position. But then, as we've been doing, scan your body. From the top of your head down to your toes. Just for any tension that you have that's not necessary for sitting up. What most people find is that when they just scan their body at this point, they're actually holding a lot of tension in their face, around their eyes, forehead, cheekbones and cheeks, or around the mouth, that has been built up over the course of the day. But here's an opportunity just to soften and relax this tension. Doing the same around the neck, the shoulders and shoulder blades, down the arms, fingers, on the back and front of your torso, the legs all the way down to the toes of both feet. Sometimes we can do this twice. When we think we're relaxed in the body, we can start at the top again and just scanning the body fairly quickly, just looking for any sources of tension, softening and relaxing this tension just by placing our attention on it. Then when you're ready, simply bringing your attention to the physical sensation of breathing in and breathing out. Just watching in-breath and out-breath. Just by noticing the physical sensations. The rising and falling of the belly. Expansion, contraction of the chest. Sensations of air in the nose. Either watching this at one specific location, like at the nose or chest or belly, or just watching the entire process. Breathing in at the nose, watching watching it go all the way down to the belly and all the way back up. This is a personal preference, how you watch the breath. So as you've learned, it's the very human thing for our attention to wander away. So once we notice that it has wandered away, we simply return our attention back to the breath. So in this way, we're making the breath the object of meditation. So as we've learned during this course so far, oftentimes body sensations and emotions and thinking will arise, but then they just disappear quite quickly. Sometimes we just have to label them. Say, this is body sensation, this is an emotion, and this is just thinking. But if you find that a body sensation becomes really strong and makes it difficult for you to maintain your attention on the breath, you can make the body sensation the object of meditation. And you can do the same thing for an emotion. Some emotions are strong, make it challenging to stay on the breath. So last week we talked about making the emotion the object of meditation, simply accepting the emotion, seeing how it's expressed in our body, just placing our attention in our body. Oftentimes when we do this, we won't have to force our attention back to the breath. Our attention will naturally come back to the breath as the home base. always have a tendency to make meditation complicated. But just think of this as very simple. All we're doing is noticing what's happening moment to moment, coming to direct experience of things that are positive, negative, or neutral. In the form of body sensations, emotions, and thinking. Simply being present, awake, for whatever happens, and then not reacting to it. Not needing to comment on it, judge it. Simply meeting our experience in a relaxed, balanced, receptive, and open sort of way. So why don't we just take a couple of deep breaths, and then when you're ready, simply open your eyes. So sometimes when I'm teaching this class, I was thinking, gosh, this is really complicated. And other times, this is really simple. The instructions themselves are very simple. But you see that you're going against your habits. And that's where the friction comes in. That's okay. You're just returning to it over and over and over again. It's like any skill. And so, when people start thinking about meditation, some people think of it, they categorize it as this kind of spiritual, metaphysical, kind of strange process. But in fact, you're just learning a skill. It's a skill like anything. It's like when you play guitar, skill. It's like learning how to garden. It's learning how to paint. It's learning how to do a movie. It's just a skill. Right? And just like or even sports, when you start to learn a sport, golf or tennis, first time you try to swing the club, it feels awkward, it feels weird, it's not right, it's not normal. You want to swing a golf club like a baseball bat, but that's not the way you play golf. You have to learn a whole new way of swinging the club. And it doesn't feel good at first, but you practice and practice and practice. And the next thing you know, it just feels very normal. And so that's really what you're doing here, is you're building that kind of skill. So I want to just take a couple of minutes and just talk about creativity, and especially about thinking. And I'm going to talk about it in relationship to what we're doing here. So I just have a couple slides for you. When people think about creativity, they really talk about having a relaxed, open, playful approach. What do you think we're doing here? We're establishing a way to be open and relaxed in your thinking. If you go and actually look and say, okay, so what are people actually talking about? If I can just get this to work. It is? Oh, there we go. Being, so like for example, looking for many possible answers rather than one. So you're actually, instead of like coalescing around one thing, you're open to, you can see these things, allowing yourself to make wild and crazy suggestions, not judging ideas, allowing yourself. Notice all these words, allow, allow. You know, being aware that these voices make lots of suggestions that are unworkable and they sound silly. Opening up, making mistakes. Is it okay to make mistakes? Sure. Learning from what has not worked well is what did. You know, sometimes when we talk about creativity, we talk about lateral thinking, seeing connections between different things. All of this actually takes a very kind of clear mind, right? Kind of clarity. But that's not the way most people are. What gets in the way is this. They get anxiety. And so all these thoughts of anxiety start coming. And it's like a crowding out problem, right? Instead of me being able to have clarity, I have fear. And instead of having clarity, I have all this self-judgment, or I'm just sitting there being distracted by past events and planning, right? So how can we have all of this stuff? How can we lower all of this stuff? That's what mindfulness is all about. So let's talk about thinking, how thinking changes. Look at all of this. So I'm going to talk about thinking and meditation, and then everything I'm saying is going to relate to what thinking happens like in the world. I'm going to make it really simple for you. There's probably 3 or 4 types of thinking that you all experience in meditation. So one type of thinking we might call kind of like wispy thinking. It's kind of thinking you're just sitting there, you probably had this experience where like some wispy thought just kind of came in and it just kind of left. You almost didn't even notice it, but it was kind of like it just kind of floated through. You have those kinds of thoughts when you're walking around as well. We have thinking that probably would be better considered like field note taking. Like, ooh, my leg hurts. Or, ooh, I just noticed an itch over here. It's like noting thinking. Right? But also, those kinds of thinking, for example, are usually just handled quite clearly just by saying, this is thinking. This is thinking. There's another kind of thinking which we call discursive thinking. Discursive thinking is like a conversation. Sometimes you have conversations with yourself. Have you ever walked around having a conversation, just realized I was having a conversation with myself? Or more likely, we're having a conversation with some imagined friend. Or maybe somebody you're about to meet. So you're about to meet somebody, and in your mind you're saying, okay, when I get over there, I'm going to say to this person X, they're going to say this, and I'm going to be prepared, because I'll have this to say, and you're just doing this, you have this whole conversation going on. This kind of thinking, for example, shows up in meditation as well. Right? And so, with those kinds of thinking, oftentimes when those things come up, what we want to do is simply just label them. It's just thinking. What you're thinking about is irrelevant in mindfulness. Right? Just so you know. Like, to you, what you're thinking about is the most important issue that human beings are facing right now. From a mindfulness standpoint, because it's in the moment, it's just thinking. It's a process. Just say, this is thinking. Okay? Sometimes by doing that, the thinking just moves along in mindfulness, in meditation. Sometimes it's your best friend forever. BFF. Just keeps coming back. Have you ever had that kind of thinking? Sometimes this happens with people that are in meditation. For example, they start planning. Okay, so this is thinking, this is planning, and then planning comes back. This is planning. It's just planning, just thinking, fine, then it comes back. It just keeps coming back. Right? So when that happens, this is what we do in meditation. We look at that thinking directly. We actually place our attention on the thinking. It becomes an object of meditation. Right? So that thinking actually becomes the object. The same way that the pain in my leg became an object of meditation, same way that the breath became an object of meditation, same way that fear that I had, or that guilt, or that grief that I had was an object, now thinking becomes the object of meditation. And then what we do is we look at the qualities of the thinking. We say, is this harsh thinking? Or is this soft thinking? Is this fast thinking? Is this slow thinking? Is this distracted thinking? Is it concentrated? And then if by doing this, we're looking at the qualities of the thinking, if it results that there's an emotion that's associated with the thinking, then what we do is we drop our attention on the thinking and put it directly on the emotion. Because what you just found, if that happens, is that that thinking is being generated by an emotion. So I'll give you an example. Like you might sit there and do planning. Just notice it's planning, it keeps coming back. It's just obsessive planning. Then you might look at the planning and go, gosh, there's a lot of energy behind this planning. It's like, oh, there's fear associated with this planning. Now what you need to do is to drop your attention on the planning and place it directly on the fear. Because the fear is what's driving the plan. Okay? Does this make sense to all of you? This is really, to me, this is really important. Because a lot of people, they when they're in their thinking, they don't realize that the thinking is actually an emotion that's driving.
Can you repeat that with like an example?
Like what I just said? Yeah, I'll tell you exactly for myself. I used to plan a whole lot. Until I realized that I was actually, I found myself in a situation where I was fear of being out of control. I fear that I couldn't control things. So let's reason it out. If you couldn't control things, what would you do? You start planning. You know? I can't control things. There's going to be an earthquake. I don't know how to control things. What do? You start planning, right? It's just a natural, it's a planning. So the first thing I did was I said, okay, so what's it like to be out of control? Can I be okay? Can I be present and relaxed with being out of control? And when that happens, of course, the need for all this thinking about planning starts to go down. Because it's like a thought factory that's driving all this. But I'm tending to the emotion itself. Okay? Does that make sense? Any questions? We'll try a little meditation with it so you can see what this is like. But, of course, usually when I do the meditation with people, and I say, put your attention on thinking, everybody isn't thinking anymore. They've gone into blissfulness. But I want you to see how it works, and so I'll guide you through that. But before I do, any questions about this?
So it moves from thoughts to feeling.
Yes. No, again, I want to make sure that we're clear about this. I'm not saying that all thoughts have an emotional component to it. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that when you have obsessive thinking, so think of it as obsessive thinking, the kind of stuff that really keeps you, for example, in meditation, it's challenging for you to keep your attention on the breath, because your attention is constantly being pulled away, that type of a thing. What you do is you put your attention on the thinking, and then, again, you don't get wrapped up in what you're thinking about. That's not important. You just put your attention on, this is thinking. Chances are the thinking is going to come in two directions. It's either going to be planning or remembering, but it might be something else. It might be more specific. But you don't want to get too much into the content of the thinking, because that's not really what's going on. You're just looking at the thinking, and you're just looking at the qualities of the thinking. Just saying, what is this thinking? What's the nature of this thinking? And if in so doing, an emotion reveals itself to you, then you want to put your attention on the emotion. Because remember, I had those concentric circles for you last week. When you're in the outer ring, when you're in thinking, if the thinking is really being driven by emotions, you want to be on the emotion. Because if you get on the emotion, then you can see what the emotion feels like in your body. And so you're bringing You're bringing the thinking from being way out of control into the present moment. Okay? Let's try it. Let's try it. So let's try it through a simple meditation, and I'll just kind of guide you. And again, we'll just see where your thinking goes. And if no thinking goes on, don't worry about it. Again, when I do these guided meditations, if all of a sudden I say, if you're thinking, don't go in and say, I'm not thinking. This is really bad. So you're not thinking. Just keep your attention on the breath. So we'll simply close our eyes and bring our attention to the breath as we've been doing. And then as we're just bringing our attention to the breath and just watching the breath go in and go out through its physical sensations, if thinking comes along, just notice it, just label it, this is thinking. And then bring your attention back to the breath if the thinking just slides on through. And then if more thinking comes along, do the same. This is just thinking. Now, if it happens that you have thinking that's going on and it just keeps coming back and it's back again, so you find that it's very difficult, challenging to constantly come back to the breath because the thinking is taking over your attention, then what you want to do is just drop your attention on the breath and put it directly on the thinking. Just say, this is thinking. And then what you want to do is just notice the qualities of the thinking. Is it fast or slow? Is it harsh or soft? Is it distracted? Is it concentrated? And then sometimes, just by doing that, and just noticing the qualities of the thinking itself might just move along. But one thing that might happen is by looking at the qualities of the thinking, you might notice that there's some emotion that's kind of tangled up in the thinking. Just an emotion. And if you happen to notice an emotion associated with the thinking, then what you want to do is to shift your attention directly onto that emotion. And then do exactly what we were doing last week and earlier today. Bringing your attention to the emotion, accepting the emotion, whatever emotion it is, seeing how it's expressed in your body, just not identifying with it. This is what this emotion is like. so then take a couple of deep breaths. And when you're ready, open your eyes. So, any questions about the instructions for this? Yes.
The first meditation we did, I noticed I was planning a lot, and I had this big job this weekend, and so I was sort of kept making sure that I had everything in order for it and everything. And during the first meditation, I sort of came to realize that it was, like just a fear of humiliation, a fear of, failure. I couldn't remember your example when you said it was a fear of being out of control.
That was just my issue.
Right. So
Yeah.
were you saying that you were sitting with this is what fear feels like, or
Yeah.
or this is what it feels like to be out of control?
Both.
Both.
Both. Yeah. I don't. When I say these things again, I don't write a dissertation on it.
Right.
I mean, this is like some people, what they do is they go, oh, is this sorrow or is this mournful lugubriousness? I mean, I want to write a whole dissertation on this. I just go, this is an emotion. It's fear of being out of control or whatever it is. Once you have that emotion, by the time you recognize it's the emotion, whether or not I can label it clearly. One of the reasons for this is that oftentimes in the moment it's a mixture of emotions that are coming in, and what I don't want to do is I don't want to attack it or get too involved in it, because what will happen is that it's kind of like oil and vinegar. If I just let it sit, they'll separate out into what they are. The more important thing is that I'm just present. That's what I'm saying, is that whenever you get caught into this, the answer is, can I be present and relaxed for it? And so your example is actually a good one, right? You have all this planning going on, and so it sounds, I would be in the same position. I would be anxious and maybe afraid of, maybe it's not going right and all of that. But you can see that, okay, fine. Can you be present for that? As you're present for that, what you'll see is that all of this thinking that's being spawned by this, it's not as necessary anymore, because you're attending to what's really going on. Right? So for those of you who are like walking around campus and you're saying, gosh, I really have to take a mindfulness class because I have this incessant thinking going on, and I really want to lower the incessant thinking going on, this is a great place to look at that. Because it's very likely that the incessant thinking that's going on is driven by an underlying emotion. So that's okay. Just now you know. This is good news, right? Because now you know it's an emotion, and you have the skills now of what to do with it. The skills you have is to be present for it, and to be relaxed, and to just be with that emotion and not identify. Just say, this is what this emotion is like. So here's what I'd like you all to do this week. I mean, because I realize the emotions are tricky, and they're very, I've told you on a number of occasions just to be present for your emotions, or even this thinking. I mean, most people can just say this is thinking, and they can see clouds, and they can do all this stuff, and I can give you cloud meditations where you can just conceptualize all your thinking as clouds in the sky, etc. And that's really helpful for people. But if there's something that's associated with emotions, but just seeing these as clouds is not going to solve the problem. You'll just say, oh, this is just clouds of incessant planning going on. We can just go back to the emotion. So I know that some of you have this kind of skeptical notion about this. I can see it in your eyes. Like, I don't know if I can do this or make this work. And so what I'm saying is just try it. Try it on simple emotions. That's the thing that I always say is do the best. Just go to Starbucks and go in line. There's a Starbucks that's on campus. Go in it. There's always a huge long line there. It's way longer, and it seems like the people behind the desk don't know what, behind the counter don't know what they're doing because it takes forever. It's a great place to experience impatience, right? Impatience is an emotion. Just sit there and say, this is what impatience is like. See what it feels like in the body. Just see how long this impatience that is going to make you overwrought and anxious and all these things. See if by just being present with it, what happens. If you have a really powerful emotion, that's something that we'll have to tackle next time. Because there's other techniques that we can use to help people with really powerful emotions, okay? And so you'll get an email from me that will give you an email to a link, the thing where it'll have on thinking meditation. All that thinking meditation is going to, guided meditation is just going to show you the technique that I just took you through for how to deal with thinking. But then, my suggestion is just listen to a general meditation, just turn on it, just turn on a timer, close your eyes. If thinking comes up, you'll know what to do. Just say, this is thinking. If the thinking becomes a big deal, then make that the object of thinking, look for the qualities of the thinking, like we said, and then see if there's any emotions. Are there any questions about this? Yes?
What about positive emotions and positive thoughts? And we've been focusing mostly on like slightly negative emotions and how to deal with that. But what if you're like thinking about something you're really excited for, or that sort of thing?
Right, that's a very good question. In meditation, we tend to just take all emotions, whether they're positive or negative, as well as, notice when I'm giving you the instructions, I say if it's positive, negative, or neutral, we take them all the same. Because we're training people not to be caught or stuck on these emotions, right? And so sometimes it's good to see a positive emotion and say, okay, I can get unstuck from that because I really want that emotion to be, but I'm going to get unstuck from that in the same way I'm going to be unstuck from the grief or the anxiety that I have. Now, when you walk out of meditation, you're walking down the street, I think positive thoughts all day long, And from a mindfulness standpoint, just have positive thoughts all day long. Just don't get hooked by them, because it'll set you up. You'll just have positive thoughts, and you'll get to the point where you go, I have positive thoughts. Oh my God, the positive thoughts will go away, and now I'm miserable again, right? So just have positive thoughts, be relaxed, right? Just have positive thoughts and be relaxed. If they go away, then they go away. Right? No big deal. All right? All right. Yes.
So the thing is, what I'm facing is like a huge paradox. Usually like the biggest problem I have with being mindful is that I have obsessive thinking. So if you see like in a movie like a psychopath or something, they're just constantly thinking about something. It keeps changing. And it's not about something I have to do or something. I'm just thinking about random like general things about like what Hitler did.
Right.
And it keeps changing.
Right.
So, and then like so the question is like, for me, is it natural to not think, or is it natural to accept that state?
Accept that state. It's natural for everybody to be thinking. Right? So, a lot of people come to mindfulness or meditation thinking they're not going to think. What we're basically doing is we're training people to say, I have thoughts. I might have lots of thoughts. I might have incredibly distracted thoughts. I might have thoughts that are going all over the place. The question is, can I just have these thoughts and not be consumed by them, entangled by them, to the point where I'm stuck, right? So, I always think of the song, Kathy's song, said my mind is distracted and diffused. My thoughts are many miles away. Right? My thoughts are crazy. I have crazy thoughts. You know, where mindfulness comes in, if I have crazy thoughts going on, I just go, wow, look at this, I have crazy thoughts going on. Right? Where people get into problems is I've got crazy thoughts going on, I shouldn't have these thoughts, should I have these thoughts, shouldn't I have these thoughts, and all this sort of stuff. Where mindfulness helps in all of this as well is to think about whether or not a lot of this thinking is driven by these underlying emotions. Because if they are, then that would be helpful to just look at. It's not because it's bad or good. There's no judgment here. It's just that there might be something you can learn about yourself. By saying, yes, I have a lot of distracted thoughts and they're all over the place, etc. But maybe some of those are being driven by, say, an underlying emotion. Okay? Take a look at that underlying emotion. Can you be present with it? So mindfulness is never, you're not going to lose thinking. If you want to lower your thinking, go on retreat. So I'm telling you. And I've been on retreat, you're on retreat for 5 days, you're going to wish that you had a thought. You know, you're gonna say, I can remember being on retreat where I just said, God, I wish I had a thought because my thinking had gone down so much. But when I'm here, walking on campus, I'm thinking all the time, just like you guys. The difference is it doesn't bother me. Right? Okay? So I'll be around for a few minutes if anybody else wants to talk. Thank you all for your practice and your attention. Have a good week.